You need someone who hates you, but has nothing to lose. So anyone in my immediate family. Got it. Hello interwebs and welcome to another review of Star Trek Picard, this time for episode 2, Maps and Legends. This was another really solid episode. I'm just really loving this series. I think it's just a really elegant show, and even though I love Star Trek Discovery, in contrast to that show, this is just a much smoother experience, which is really surprising considering that this is the show's first season, and usually Star Trek first seasons are not great. Just look at, any of them except for the original series. And up front, I'm going to give you my spoiler-free impression, so if you haven't seen the episode, you can watch the next few minutes and I'll let you know when spoilers begin. And I'm just surprised that 2 episodes in, pretty much every character feels firmly established, feels lived in, feels fully fleshed out, and considering that only Picard is the only character that we've seen so far that is a recurring character, that's insanely awesome writing to make us really feel that these characters are just so well developed. And I have to say, the plot of this episode is really starting to intrigue me. Not that I wasn't intrigued by episode 1, but this episode was a lot more burdened with trying to get the nitty-gritty details of how this intricate plot is working. And while it does kind of get bogged down a little bit throughout the episode with a lot of exposition, a lot of trying to explain who the players are in this big game of intrigue that the show is trying to build up, I think overall it does a solid job at establishing that and getting us to see some of the cool interactions and cool relationships that are at play between all of the characters. But again, like I said, it does get bogged down just a hair with trying to explain to us a lot of the exposition going on. And like I said with the first episode, I kind of expect that to be the case with the first 2 or 3 episodes going in, and then probably after episode 3, if there's still a lot of exposition going on where characters kind of give us data dumps like we get in this episode, then I'll have a little bit more of a problem with it. But as it is, I do find it intriguing, and they do find interesting ways to deliver that exposition to us, but generally it is a lot going on and a lot for me to remember. Like even now, I'm giving you this review after just having watched the episode. I'm probably going to miss a lot of the exposition when I get into the nitty-gritty talking points of the episode. So forgive me if I missed something, but I just watched it and I'm probably gonna have to rewatch this 2 or 3 times before I get all of the pieces of the puzzle that this episode started to give us and some of the intriguing plot threads that it started to give us. So overall, a phenomenal second episode for Star Trek Picard, and I am so happy to be just reviewing more Star Trek, reviewing more Picard. And I should mention, even though I didn't mention it before, it's just wonderful to see Jean-Luc being Jean-Luc. Like last episode was a lot of us catching us up to speed, also seeing him kind of not in the form that we like to see him in. But this episode really just started to show us the Jean-Luc that we know, the Jean-Luc that can get a mission going, can get prepared. And he still has some hiccups that he still has to pick up on. Picard on? There's a pun in there somewhere. I can't really find it. It's 1 a.m. I'm kind of tired. But I really just love seeing Patrick Stewart starting to rebuild this character from the ground up and sort of refine himself, both as the actor and both as the character, just refining themselves being Jean-Luc Picard again, the one that we know. And I just think it's a fantastic job. Alright, so that's my spoiler-free impressions of the episode. Let's get into the nitty-gritty overall plot description of this episode. I'm going to let you guys know, just to be aware, I actually moved today. I was moving all of my stuff into a new apartment, so I'm kind of tired. And I haven't even set up my bed yet, but I set up my green screen so I could do this video because my priorities are in order. That's neither here nor there. Let's dive in. Alright, the episode starts off with us finally seeing the destruction of Mars, what was hinted at in Children of Mars, and what we kind of heard about in the first episode of Star Trek Picard. We finally get to see it here. We get to see that the Federation was using the synths as basically, slave labor, the thing that we were warned against in the episode Measure of a Man. Now, I know a lot of certain reviewers of this episode, not to name names, will probably be like, well, the Federation never would have done that sort of thing. They never would have used synthetics to be a slave race. When here's me thinking of that time where the EMHs on Voyager were all being used as miners. So yeah, it's totally a thing Starfleet would do. totally think Starfleet has already done. And I like the miners kind of playing around with the synthetic. I love the hell yeah. That felt like very human, very real, and we got like little echoes of Data in that, because that's kind of what Data would do in a lot of ways, kind of like echoing people and trying to learn that way. So we get a sense that the synthetics here do have some intelligence, do have a sense of learning within them. And I thought that was a nice little subtle hint to be like, these things are people. They have some form of life going on in them. But I could also see how it was a bit off-putting and creepy to the workers there. And so I like that sort of like middle ground of like, we can kind of start seeing signs of them being people, being sentient. But it's also a little bit off-putting. Also in that scene, we get a hint that the synthetics didn't just rebel on their own. Someone hacked them. Now, I know a lot of people will say that that probably was the Romulans, the Zhat Vash that we learn about in the next scene, because they maybe were trying to hack the AI to try to attack the Mars colony so that the Federation would then outlaw AI, because the Zhat Vash has a thing against AI. But I'm curious if it actually was the Zhat Vash that activated the synths to go rogue, because by doing so, they did also help lead to the deaths of thousands and millions of Romulans, because of the whole, like, the AI caused the destruction of the fleet that was going to save the Romulans. So it wouldn't make sense to me that the Zhat Vash would be the ones that made the synthetics go crazy. So I am kind of curious to see how that develops. There are numerous guesses I can make. It could have been Bruce Maddox himself. It could have been the Zhat Vash, like I said. It could have been Starfleet. It could have been a number of cases, but I don't think we really have enough information yet to kind of really hook into that. I would just discount the obvious choice of the Zhat Vash, because that doesn't make entirely a lot of sense to me and is a little bit too easy of an answer there. So I am curious to see who hacked the synths. Also, I will say the scene where the synth is like shooting people was a bit brutal. I don't have any problem with that. I think Star Trek can do that. It doesn't bother me, but I know some people will have a problem with that being so brutal of deaths going on in this episode, and definitely not necessarily kid-friendly. Next, we get a cross-cut scene where we learn about what I said before, the Zhat Vash from the Tal Shiar agents that work for Picard, and we also get Laris and Picard going to investigate Daj's old apartment that we saw in episode 1, and learning that the stuff behind her kidnapping had all been erased and hidden, probably by the Zhat Vash. At least that's what we're believing it to be. Now, I did like this scene, and I do love, and I have to say right up front, Laris and, the other Romulan, I forget his name, but both of them, my favorite characters on the show so far. I absolutely, absolutely adore them. Besides, Picard, of course. But I absolutely adore those two characters. Every scene they're in this entire episode, they are just pitch perfect. I'm saying that up front because could mention it every single time they come up in every scene, but just imagine that I'm saying that every time that Laris and the other Romulan are on screen, I adore them with all of my heart. So this discussion of the Zhat Vash and the investigation, I thought both scenes worked really well. I think the Zhat Vash, like I was saying at the top, is a bit of a exposition dump. It's like, oh, here's this random Romulan secret police that we've never heard of. But it does kind of make sense to me, and I kind of like that little joke of like, well, you consider the Tal Shiar the secret police, but I mean, that seems redundant. You could put secret in front of anything in the Romulan Empire, and it would basically be what it is. And I thought that was really funny and a good explanation of what Romulans are. So the Zhat Vash showing up doesn't bother me at all. It is a bit strange, and I hope we delve into why they hate AI so much, why they hate any synthetic life form so much, because it does seems, I don't want to say convenient, because it is convenient for the story to happen, but it does kind of make sense if they're the ones instigating the plot. So it's not convenient, but I am just sort of curious to see why they hate synthetics so much. Because if it's just sort of like, there's a group that hates synthetics, that's a bit weird to me. But I could easily see it being justified further down the road. So it's not a problem with me. I'm just sort of curious to see where it's going to end up. I also will say, while I did like this scene, I also did really like the technobabble in the scene. We finally are getting more Star Trek technobabble, but unlike Discovery, which sometimes gets a bit wonky in its technobabble, this technobabble actually made a lot of sense. Like, I was listening to it, I was like, yeah, no, that all checks out in my brain. I mean, I'm sure some hacker out there or some computer person would probably be like, that makes no sense to me. But, to me, it sounded all good, so I like the really strong technobabble writing here. The only thing I had problem with this scene was just the cross-cutting got a bit confusing here and there. It could have been easier if they were doing one scene and doing the other. I understand that they were trying to make it a little bit more exciting by cross-cutting between the two, but it made it a little bit hard to follow some of the exposition going on here and there. Next, we go to Narak on the Borg cube sleeping with Soji. Man, they got together really quick, didn't they? It's just like, hi, I'm broken inside. Let's sleep together. But it does kind of build up Soji's character. She does kind of like broken things, which you see later on in the episode when she's working on the reclaimed Borg. She does seem to really care about this being. And so I like that sort of establishment of her character. She likes things that are supposedly broken, and she likes fixing them, so she can see that in Narak. So hopefully, as we learn, Narak does have nefarious motives. Maybe that's going to lead into Narak switching sides and wanting to help her because he starts to develop feelings for her. I kind of sense that that's where that story is going to go. He's going to, want to betray her. He's going to have to betray her because of his sister, again, which we learn later on in the episode, but he's going to develop feelings for her, and he's going to want to help her in the end. That's my guess. I might be wrong on that. It seems a bit obvious in terms of the arc, but it's not an ineffective arc. I could totally see it working. I do like his character, and I like Soji's character in these scenes. I think both actors are playing them super well. Also, Narak is in the Ethan Peck line of hotness, which is like my exact kind of hotness that I enjoy, so I'm gonna have a problem anytime Narak's on screen. Narak is really hot. It's like him, and then Ethan Peck is like right here, so they're like very close, and I am just turned on every time he's on screen. Sorry, not sorry. But yeah, I think both actors play them really well. I think it's good to sort of build out these two characteristics. I like their sort of like jokingness about Romulans having secrets. I thought that was all great overall. Like I said, I just hope that the plot has a few more twists and turns in it than what I kind of expect it to have, as I laid out earlier. But I think that they both had some really wonderful and intriguing dialogue here. I like that they called the Borg cube the artifact, sort of like reclaiming that idea in a way. It's just really, really fascinating building out of what's going on here on this Borg cube. Next, we go back to the Chateau Picard, and Picard meets with a doctor, one that we learned was from the Stargazer. I actually have to say, I am liking that the show is giving us a lot of Stargazer references. It's already like, I think we've got more information about the Stargazer on this show in 2 episodes than we did in like 3 seasons of TNG. We got like a reference to Stargazer in episode 1, and then we got the doctor here in the Stargazer in episode 2, which I think is really cool. I've seen a ton of the Enterprise, and I'm glad that they're not just calling back to Enterprise stuff, but building out an area of Picard's life that we didn't get to really learn a lot about. So I'm liking that a lot of the callbacks, well, we do get hints of, his time on the Enterprise. We're getting to see and hear about stuff before Next Generation in the Stargazer, and after Next Generation, what happened to him with like Raffi and all that stuff. So I really kind of enjoy that we're building out both ends of Picard's timeline here, and not just focusing on like the nostalgia of the Enterprise, because I just think that that's a really well thought out sort of building out of his characters. Like, we can learn stuff and there are interesting Easter eggs, but it's not necessarily like hitting us over the head with nostalgia. It's not like we have tons of nostalgia for the Stargazer, but it is an intriguing part of his life. And we learn that the doctor has probably diagnosed Picard with, I believe it was called Irematic syndrome. They don't say it in the episode, but it's the memory problems that Picard was having, essentially dementia, way back in the episode All Good Things when we saw forward jumps. Picard was sort of suffering from dementia at that time. So it's probably the symptoms of that syndrome, Irematic syndrome. I might be saying that wrong, but it's clear that that's going to be a problem throughout the series moving forward, that Picard's going to actually be dealing with that. And I like that element of continuity, as sad as it may be to know that Picard's going to have to go through that. Then we get Picard going to Starfleet headquarters. I loved this opening scene. I thought it was really, really fun and cute. I loved the TNG music when Picard steps into Starfleet, that dun 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 dun. Like, we got that sort of fanfare. Really great musical cue there. I like the fact that we got to see Pike's Enterprise, and then switching to the Enterprise D. I guess screw Enterprise B and C, but we got to have, that was the little bit of nostalgia, sort of fanfare, whatever stuff, fan service in this episode. Got to see both Enterprises that we care about as the audience, and screw the B and the C, I guess. And that little joking, like, can you spell your name? And you could tell that Ensign was just kind of having fun with it. It was all really just really clever, fun beats. And I'm sure some people are going to be really upset that we get to see the Disco Prize instead of the Enterprise from TOS, but you know what? Live with it. Then we go into the conversation with the Admiral, which, speaking of people that can live with problems, this is going to be the scene that I know certain elements of commentators on Star Trek, I will say, will probably have the most problem with. Was like, the Federation never would have acted like this, and yelled at Picard and saying the fucking hubris. Yeah, we got another F-bomb in Star Trek. Again, I'm sure people are gonna love that. But it made a lot of sense to me. Yes, the F-bomb probably was, a bit egregious, maybe. But I think it really showed the Admiral's frustration and anger at Picard. I thought Picard going to see Starfleet and just saying, here's what happened, makes sense. I mean, I feel like he would have some semblance of trust to go into Starfleet and say, hey, maybe I have enough context, they're the right channel to go through. But I also understand them being like, you were just on TV just saying screw you guys, essentially, literally like yesterday or 2 days ago, so you coming to us now is a bit of a jerk move. And then saying like, I can be demoted to captain, it's fine. I can totally see her being pissed off by that. So, and her laying out her case really shows us the justification that Starfleet had for leaving the Romulans to die. And again, like I said last review, it makes sense to me. I agree with Picard. I think that the Federation should have helped the Romulans. They should have done everything they could have to try and save as many lives as they could have. They had an obligation to do that. I think we do have an obligation to do that. That being said, it is a rock and a hard place scenario, so it's not one that I sort of see as black and white, like, yes, you should have done this, no, you shouldn't have. But it is a sort of like, I understand where they're coming from, even though I don't necessarily agree, and I'm more on the side of Picard in this situation. It's a crap situation all around, especially since we saw how brutal it was at the beginning of the episode when we saw the attack on Mars. So really intriguing job there. I really, really love that scene between the Picard and the Admiral. I thought it really worked really well, but I know a lot of people out there are probably gonna have a problem with it. And I'm not saying that anyone who has a problem with that scene is, like, you know, a toxic fan or anything like that. You could say that it was probably a bit much. It worked for me. I did, you know, when I was watching, I was like, oh, wow, she's really giving it to him. I understand it, but I could see how it comes across as a bit harsh. So it kind of like, your mileage may vary, but I know some people are probably going to use that to fuel a certain narrative about the show that I don't like. But enough about them. I don't want to focus on them too much. Back in the Borg Cube, we get some exposition about how the Borg Cube works, and we also get some more fun stuff between Narak and Soji, and then this other Trill lady who shows up, and kind of get to learn that they're doing stuff with the Borg, and the Romulans are sort of controlling it. I'm kind of curious to see why the Romulans are in charge of a Borg cube when their civilization was devastated. Like, they're not living on the Borg cube, but they're doing something. They're like studying the Borg, de-Borgifying them, something like that. So I'm not entirely sure. I am curious to see how that storyline plays out and to learn why the Romulans are even there and why they're in control and why they're even letting like doctors come on board to do stuff from the Federation. It's all very curious, so I'm hoping we get some more explanation. It's being doled out at a steady pace throughout the series, so I do like that. Plus, also, we get Soji admitting that Narak is really, really hot, which, yeah, he is. Then we get Dr. Allison Pill. I forgot the actual character's name, but I know it's played by Allison Pill. But Allison Pill comes to visit Picard, and she sort of talks about, basically we already knew we need to be looking after Soji, and, you know, Daj was just created about 3 years ago. But I also like the implication of, like, maybe Daj and Soji weren't just like, hey, you know, these are people that just exist. They just happen to exist. But maybe they actually had some sort of, you know, motive. There was a motive that Daj had, whether it was conscious or not, to join the Daystrom Institute. Soji has a motive, whether conscious or not, to be at the Borg reclamation site. Maybe they were made to do something by Bruce Maddox or whoever did make them. So I am curious to see how that bodes out. There was an implication that both of those characters had some sort of motive, and that may be why they've been killed. But I'm sure Daj, it seems to me that Daj didn't know that she had a motive, but it might have been something that programmed deep down into her. I also liked this scene because it gave us a sense of a little bit more of Dr. Allison Pill's character. It gave us a sense that, you know, she really, really is intrigued by synthetic life, that she really is, she wants to learn and study them, and that was her passion that unfortunately got ground down because the Federation outlaws synthetics. So I really like seeing that side of her character here. I really like the scene where we get Daj and where we get Soji talking about, you know, she has a problem with the word nameless. It kind of brings back echoes of that episode Measure of a Man, where Data was only called an it and not seen as a person. So of course Soji would, as a synthetic, even though she may not know it or not, she would have a problem with the word nameless and being used to describe a being of some sort. And I really kind of liked that building out of her character, that she is someone who cares for people's personhood, even if they're not seen as people, if they're seen as Borg. And also the, you know, reclaiming of the Borg was super gross, but it makes sense. You know, I always found it weird in Best of Both Worlds that Picard's sort of deborgification was fairly benign. He just sort of had stuff stuck onto him. Now you could explain that it was done quickly, but yeah, it was really creepy to see that here. And obviously Narak still has the hots for Soji and is like, oh, she cares about people. Isn't that attractive? Then we start to get the building out of the complicated plot going on within Starfleet. So it seems that the admiral that Picard talked to contacted a Commodore named O, who is Vulcan? she may be Romulan, but she's probably Vulcan. It could have been, I wish they had done like another race or something, but maybe they're trying to show like Vulcans have an affinity for helping Romulans because they're from the same race, but it's a bit confusing because like, is she Romulan and is she Vulcan? I'm not entirely sure, but I think she's Vulcan. So this Commodore seems to be Romulan sympathetic and contacts Lieutenant Rizzo and basically lays out that yes, they are working for the Zhat Vash, or are some sort of associated with them, and they want to stop Picard from doing stuff. Now, this was a bit of a complicated rabbit hole because it's like, okay, there's the Admiral, there's the Commodore, and then there's this Lieutenant who turns out to be a human pretending to be a Romulan pretending to be a human who's actually the sister of Narak. It's like a lot of layers within all this, like all these different, mysterious pieces going on. And it's kind of a lot, but I understand why they might have done it, that it was like, oh, the Admiral, while she does have her problems with Picard, she is legitimate. She is a legitimate entity of Starfleet. She's not involved in this plot. And then we do have the more nefarious Starfleeters doing nefarious Starfleet things, as nefarious Starfleet people are wont to do. I was surprised that they didn't turn out to be Section 31. Maybe they will. Maybe Zhat Vash and Section 31 are associated or something like that. We'll sort of see how that goes. But maybe they're not trying to lean into Section 31, given that they used it a lot on Discovery. But I am curious to see how that plot goes, but it is interesting to see that there's like this rabbit hole here. But I guess they're trying to make the distinction that there is a legitimate Starfleet that has a problem with Picard, and then there's this group that's, doing nefarious things. So I'm curious to see that out, but it is a sort of a deep well to sort of dig down into. Then we get Picard putting on his comm badge, and then he goes to see Lieutenant Raffi, who we know from the comics was his old first officer on the Verity, and for some reason she hates him. We don't necessarily know why, but I loved their meeting here in this episode. I thought it was really cute that she comes out and ready to shoot him, but then she's like, there's nothing you could say that get me interested in him. Picard's like, oh, there are Romulans doing stuff on Earth, and she's like, oh, that's interesting. Is that the 86? That was a really fun and clever scene. I thought that their repertoire, even in this short scene, was very good. So I'm curious to see how that relationship is going to build out throughout future episodes. I think that's really, really cute and a really, really fun relationship starter. I think we could sort of see that build out in an interesting way. So I'm curious to see how those two go. It is a bit of a weird note to end on for the episode for that character of Picard. It would have been better to end the episode with him putting on the comm badge and calling Lieutenant Raffi. That would have made much more sense to me, and like put the Lara scene where she's like, I don't want you to go. Put that before it, and then, then Picard gets the impetus to call Raffi after that point. I would have liked that a little bit better, so we didn't end on this note with Raffi. It just was a strange note to end on, but I think it works well, and I'm curious to see the relationship moving forward. Also, I forgot to mention, I did love the scene where Laris just tells Picard, we need to protect you. You can't go into space by yourself. And I thought that was, again, like I said, I love that character so much, so I really, really enjoyed that scene. And I really liked that, they are Tal Shiar agents. They are like really deep people, but they are people that really care and want to protect Picard. And I just adore their characters so much. And I also love the references to Worf, LaForge, and Riker. And I also loved Picard's explanation of why he can't go to them. It made perfect sense to me, and I liked that there was a reason that we weren't getting these characters. Also, I liked the fact that we got confirmation that LaForge wasn't killed. Because, again, if you read the comics, you know that LaForge was at Utopia Planitia right before the attack on Mars by the synthetic. So it was very possible that LaForge could have died. So I like the confirmation that LaForge wasn't dead in this episode. So I did like the little references there, and it made perfect sense, and it made perfect sense why they aren't going to show up. And then we end on the last scene between Lieutenant Rizzo and Narak, and we learn that they're brother and sister, and that Narak is, doing nefarious things, and that Lieutenant Rizzo is a Romulan pretending to be human in Starfleet, and is an undercover agent probably for the Zhat Vash. I thought that was an intriguing development of the plot, that Narak has a sister who is pretending to work for Starfleet. That's super intriguing. I'm curious to see how that relationship will build out. It's clear that Lieutenant Rizzo will probably be one of our main antagonists throughout the rest of the series, so having a connection to Narak, who may turn out to be a good guy, may turn out to be a bad guy, so I like that sort of levels of stuff with there, and added an intriguing part to their relationship in this episode. Overall, like I said, I think this episode was really, really strong. I think there are some things that I think some people their mileage may vary on if they liked it or not, such as the Admiral getting really angry at Picard. I think some people may have a problem with it. For me, it worked really, really well. And I think that there's a lot of exposition going on in this episode, like I said, but overall it all made sense to me, it all worked for me. It'll probably take another viewing or two for it all to like sink in, the big lore dumps that are going on, but I kind of like that we're kind of getting it out of the way up front and that future episodes can kind of just go on this adventure. So I'm really, really enjoying that. So overall, Star Trek Picard, it's a lot of fun. It's really building out the Star Trek lore in a really intriguing way. I'm so glad to see this universe pushing forward and we're getting new information about the universe instead of, dealing with stuff from the TOS era, which I loved, and I love Disco, but I just, this is exactly what I wanted out of a Star Trek show, to really push forward the series and franchise in a new way, telling new ways of telling stories, but also building out the universe in a way that makes sense, feels like it's advancing the universe in a way that feels new and fresh and intriguing and not just doing the same old things again. So just absolutely fantastic. I'm so hyped for the rest of the series. It is so good, and I think the only reason I'm not like jumping for joy with how much I love this episode right now is again because I spent the entire day moving, so I'm a bit tired. So yeah, what did you think of this episode? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you want to make sure not to miss any of my Picard reviews or any of my other Star Trek discussions or other videos that I do here on this channel, don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. Also, if you want to help make this channel even better, don't forget to give to my Patreon or give to my PayPal. Either way helps me. Like I said, I moved, so any financial contribution that you can make really goes right to helping me, deal with the move. It also helps with the surgery that I have coming up, so that really means a lot to me. Whatever you can give if you want to give. All right, now I gotta go make my mattress because I gotta find somewhere to sleep. So that should be fun. But regardless of if you subscribe or if you help me out financially, I'm just glad that you stopped by, and I hope, as always, that you live long and prosper. And special thanks to my commander level and above Patreons, Stefan Schuhart, Michael McGee, Boyd Earl, Law Lindley, Wellington Marcus, Munir Amlani, BBD, and Mari Nekar.